When hope came knocking, the morning shift at Meridian Depot began like any other in the past 15 years. Marcus Chen checked the fuel gauges, calibrated the docking systems, and prepared another pot of coffee that could dissolve hull plating. The small refueling station floated at the edge of the Kepler void, a region of space so unremarkable that most star charts didn't bother listing it. But that was exactly why Marcus liked it here. Meridian Depot wasn't much to look at. 3 interconnected modules cobbled together from decommissioned freighter parts, solar collectors that had seen better decades, and a fusion reactor that hummed with the reliability of an old friend. Marcus had built this place from scrap and determination after leaving the colonial marines, and it had become his sanctuary. Out here, nobody bothered you unless they needed fuel, supplies, or a warm meal. The depot served the forgotten corners of human space, independent miners, survey crews, and the occasional smuggler who preferred routes that didn't appear on official navigation charts. Marcus didn't ask questions, and his customers didn't volunteer answers. It was a simple arrangement that had worked for everyone involved. His daughter Alina emerged from the engineering bay, her coveralls stained with hydraulic fluid and her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. At 23, she had inherited her father's talent for making broken things work and her mother's gift for seeing solutions where others saw only problems. She had been born on this station and knew every bolt, circuit, and pipe better than most people knew their own homes. "Dad, the number 2 fuel pump is acting up again," she said, wiping her hands on a rag that had seen better days. "I've got it running, but we should replace the coupling before it decides to take a vacation." Marcus nodded, making a mental note to order the part from the next supply run. "Thanks, sweetheart. Any word from Captain Rodriguez about our supply delivery? He's running 2 days late." "Something about customs delays at Proxima Station." Alina rolled her eyes. "Probably means he got caught smuggling something again." Before Marcus could respond, an alarm chimed softly from the communications console. Not the harsh klaxon that indicated immediate danger, but the gentler tone that meant someone wanted to dock. Marcus glanced at the display and frowned. The sensor array showed nothing but empty space. "That's odd," he muttered, running a diagnostic on the sensors. Everything checked out normal, but the docking request signal continued to pulse. "Alina, you getting anything on the short-range scanners?" She moved to her workstation and began cycling through different sensor modes. Nothing on standard frequencies, but wait, ... Her fingers danced across the controls. "There's something there, really faint, almost like they're running silent." Marcus felt a familiar tingle at the base of his neck, the same instinct that had kept him alive during his military service. Ships didn't run silent in the middle of nowhere unless they had a very good reason. Put it on the main screen. The display flickered and resolved into an image that made both humans catch their breath. A fleet of vessels, unlike anything in human design, databases, hung in space just beyond normal sensor range. The ships were elegant and organic-looking, with flowing lines that seemed to suggest growth rather than construction. Their hulls gleamed with an opalescent quality that shifted colors in the starlight. But beauty couldn't hide the damage. Scorch marks scarred their pristine surfaces, and several ships trailed atmosphere and debris. These weren't pleasure craft or explorers. These were refugees. The communication system crackled to life, and an unfamiliar voice spoke in accented but understandable English. "Human Station, this is Zektar of the Valerian Exodus Fleet. We request emergency docking and fuel. We can pay in precious metals or energy crystals. Please respond." Marcus hesitated. First contact with an alien species wasn't exactly covered in the refueling station operator's manual, but the desperation in the alien's voice was universal, and his military training kicked in. You didn't leave people stranded in the void, no matter what species they happened to be. Valerian Fleet, this is Meridian Depot. You're cleared for emergency docking at platforms 2 through 6. Please maintain minimum power signatures and follow our docking guidance system. Alina stared at her father. Dad, are you sure about this? We don't know anything about them. No, but I know desperation when I hear it, Marcus replied. And look at those ships. Whatever they're running from, it scared them badly enough to risk contact with an unknown species. As the first Valerian vessel approached the docking platform, Marcus got his first clear look at their technology. The ship moved with a grace that seemed to defy physics, making minute adjustments with a precision that suggested incredibly advanced engineering. When it finally settled onto the docking clamps, there was barely a vibration transmitted through the station's structure. The airlock cycled, and Marcus found himself face to face with humanity's first alien visitor. Zektar stood nearly 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs and features that suggested an evolutionary path very different from Earth's. His skin had a faint luminescent quality, and his large eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably recognizable, despite their alien origin. You are the station commander, Zektar said, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested vocal cords designed for a different atmosphere. I am grateful for your assistance. My people have traveled far to reach this place. Marcus Chen, he replied, extending his hand in the universal gesture of greeting. After a moment's hesitation, Zektar grasped it with fingers that were longer and more delicate than human hands, but surprisingly strong. Your gesture of welcome is appreciated, Marcus Chen. I must warn you, however, that by helping us, you may have placed yourself and your family in great danger. Before Marcus could ask what he meant, Elena's voice echoed through the station's intercom system. Dad, you need to see this. We've got company coming, and they don't look friendly. The main display showed a new formation of ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. These vessels were nothing like the graceful Valerian craft. They were angular, aggressive-looking warships bristling with weapon ports and sensor arrays. Even at this distance, their hostile intent was unmistakable. Korthok hunters, Zek said, his luminescent skin darkening with what Marcus's guessed was fear or anger. They have followed us across half the galaxy. They will not be satisfied with simply reclaiming us. Your interference will be seen as an act of war. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. How long before they reach us? At their current approach speed, perhaps 2 hours. Commander, I understand if you wish us to leave. We have no right to involve your people in our conflict. Alina had joined them in the docking bay, and Marcus saw his own determination reflected in her eyes. Growing up on a frontier station had taught them both that sometimes you had to take a stand, regardless of the odds. How many refugees are in your fleet? Marcus asked. Nearly 10,000 souls, mostly civilians. The elderly, children, scientists, and artists. The last remnants of our homeworld before the Korthok cleansing began. Marcus made his decision, with the certainty that came from 15 years of military service and another 15 years of living on the frontier. Then we make our stand here. Alina, start bringing the other ships in for refueling. Full emergency protocols. Dad, are you insane? Alina stared at him. This is a refueling depot, not a fortress. What are we supposed to fight them with? Marcus smiled grimly. We're human, sweetheart. We'll figure something out. We always do. Over the next hour, Meridian Depot transformed from a quiet refueling station into a hive of activity. The remaining Valerian ships docked or anchored nearby, their crews working frantically to repair damage and refuel their vessels. Marcus opened the station's emergency supplies, distributing food and medical aid to the refugees, while Alina worked with Valerian engineers to understand their technology. It quickly became clear that the aliens possessed capabilities that human science could barely comprehend. Their power systems operated on principles that seemed to violate several laws of physics, and their computing systems used quantum entanglement in ways that made Elena's head spin. But they were also remarkably similar to humans in their determination and creativity. Zektar proved to be more than just a refugee leader. He had been a military engineer before the Korthok invasion, and his knowledge of both Valerian and Korthok technology made him invaluable as they planned their defense. Working together, the humans and aliens began to devise strategies that neither species could have conceived alone. The Korthok fleet continued its approach, their massive warships dwarfing the small depot and its refugee fleet. Long-range sensors showed at least 20 vessels, each one capable of reducing Meridian Depot to atoms with a single weapon salvo. By any rational calculation, resistance was suicide, but rationality had never been humanity's strong suit. Alina made the first breakthrough, realizing that the station's industrial fuel processing systems could be modified to create makeshift weapons. The same magnetic containment fields that compressed hydrogen for fusion reactors could be reconfigured to launch projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. It wasn't elegant, but it would have to do. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a xenogeologist who had been working with one of the survey crews, proved invaluable in understanding Valerian energy technology. Her background in quantum mechanics allowed her to grasp concepts that the alien refugees had difficulty translating into human terms. Working together, she and the Valerian scientists began developing hybrid technologies that combined human engineering, pragmatism, with alien theoretical sophistication. As the Korthok fleet drew closer, Marcus stood in the station's observation deck, watching the enemy vessels grow larger on the display screens. Beside him, Alina checked and rechecked their improvised weapons systems, while Zektar coordinated with the refugee fleet's limited defensive capabilities. "You know we can't win this," Alina said quietly. "Probably not," Marcus agreed, "but that's never stopped us before. The galaxy will remember what happens here today," Zektar added. "Whether we survive or not, the story of humans who stood against impossible odds to protect strangers will spread among the stars. Your species has given us hope when we thought none remained." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. In a few minutes, the Korthok fleet would arrive, and their small alliance would face the ultimate test. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and operating with improvised weapons against a military force that had conquered worlds. But they were human, and humans had never learned how to give up. "All stations, prepare for incoming transmission," Alina announced. "The Korthoks are hailing us." The main screen filled with the image of a Korthok commander, a reptilian creature whose scarred hide and cold eyes spoke of countless battles and victories. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute confidence of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience. "Human vessel, you harbor criminals and enemies of the Korthok Empire. Surrender the Valerian refugees immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Continue to interfere, and we will ensure your suffering lasts for days." Marcus stepped forward, meeting the alien commander's gaze through the screen. "This is Marcus Chen, commander of Meridian Depot. These people are under my protection. If you want them, you'll have to come through me." The Korthok commander's expression shifted to what might have been amusement. One small station and a handful of primitive weapons against the might of the Korthok fleet. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human." "Probably both," Marcus replied. "But that's never stopped us before." David versus Goliath. Among the stars, the Korthok fleet formed an attack formation with the precision of a military force that had conquered dozens of worlds. 20 warships arranged themselves in a sphere around Meridian Depot, their weapon ports glowing with barely contained energy. Each vessel was easily 10 times the size of the small refueling station, and their combined firepower could have reduced a small moon to rubble. Commander Thane's image filled the communication screen one final time. "Last chance, humans, surrender. The Valerians and I might allow your families to die quickly." Marcus stood in the station's command center, surrounded by displays showing the approaching doom. Alina worked frantically at her jury-rigged weapons console, while Dr. Tanaka monitored the hybrid power systems they had cobbled together from human engineering and Valerian technology. Around the station, the refugee fleet's few remaining warships took defensive positions, their graceful forms dwarfed by the angular brutality of the Korthok vessels. "No deal," Marcus replied simply. Thane's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. "Then you will serve as an example to any other species that considers interfering with Korthok justice." The first salvo came without further warning. Streams of crimson energy lanced through space, targeted at the station's power core and docking bays. But Elena's preparations proved their worth. The modified deflector shields, powered by Valerian energy crystals and human stubbornness, absorbed the initial attack with minimal damage. "Shields holding at 60%, Alina reported, her fingers dancing across controls that had never been designed for combat. "But we can't take many more hits like that." Marcus activated the station's makeshift weapon systems. The modified fuel injectors launched streams of metallic projectiles, accelerated to incredible velocities by magnetic fields. Originally designed for handling fusion plasma, the improvised weapons lacked the elegance of military hardware, but they hit with the force of small meteors. The first Korthok vessel to feel the impact of human ingenuity discovered that sometimes brute force engineering could be surprisingly effective. The magnetic projectiles punched through its shields and armor plating, sending the warship spinning out of formation with atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches. "One down, 19 to go," Alina muttered, already working to realign their weapons for the next shot. But the Korthaks weren't impressed by humanity's first success. The remaining warships adjusted their formation and began a coordinated bombardment that tested every improvised system the small alliance had managed to create. Energy beams, missile salvos, and exotic weapons that defied easy categorization hammered the station's defenses. The Valerian refugee ships fought back with their own weapons, beams of coherent light that could slice through solid matter and gravitational distortion fields that twisted space around their targets. But their vessels had been designed for exploration and transport, not warfare, and they were quickly overwhelmed by the superior firepower of the Korthok fleet. Dr. Tanaka made the breakthrough that changed everything, working with quantum principles that human science had only begun to understand. She realized that the Valerian energy crystals could be overloaded in a controlled cascade that would release tremendous amounts of power. It was incredibly dangerous and would likely destroy the station, but it might take the Korthok fleet with them. It's basically turning our power core into the galaxy's largest hand grenade, she explained rapidly. The energy release would be equivalent to a small star going supernova, but focused into a directed beam. How long do we have to evacuate? Marcus asked. Evacuate? Dr. Tanaka looked confused. There's nowhere to evacuate to. The energy release would vaporize everything within 1,000 kilometers. This is a suicide weapon. Marcus felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. Around him, human and Valerian crew members continued fighting a losing battle against impossible odds. The station's shields were down to 20%, and several sections had been completely destroyed by enemy fire. Alina looked up from her weapons console, her face streaked with sweat and determination. Dad, if we're going to do this, it has to be now. The power core is already showing signs of instability from all the modifications we've made. Through the observation windows, Marcus could see Korthok boarding shuttles launching from the enemy vessels. They had decided to take the station by force rather than simply destroying it, probably wanting to capture some refugees alive for interrogation and torture. Zekta, Marcus called to the Valerian leader. Get your people out of here. Take the fastest ships and run for the edge of the system. The tall alien shook his luminescent head. We will not abandon those who have protected us. If you make this sacrifice, we will ensure the galaxy knows what happened here. No, Marcus said firmly. Someone has to survive to tell the story. That's an order. Zektar straightened, recognizing the tone of command. It will be as you say. Marcus, Chen. Your names will be remembered among the stars. As the Valerian evacuation ships began their desperate flight toward hyperspace, Marcus turned to Dr. Tanaka. How long until the cascade reaches critical mass? About 3 minutes once I initialize the sequence, she replied. Maybe less if the Korthoks hit us with another heavy barrage. Alina had abandoned her weapons console and was now working to boost the station's communication array. I'm broadcasting everything on all frequencies, she said. Military channels, civilian networks, even the emergency beacons. If we're going out, the whole galaxy is going to know why. The first Korthok boarding parties reached the station's outer airlocks. Marcus could hear the sound of energy weapons cutting through bulkhead doors, and he knew they had maybe minutes before the aliens reached the command center. But those minutes were all they needed. Initialize the cascade, he ordered Dr. Tanaka. Hands moved across the control panel with the precision of someone who had spent years working with forces that could destroy worlds. Deep within the station's core, Valerian energy crystals began to resonate at frequencies that caused reality itself to tremble. The effect was immediate and visible. Space around Meridian Depot began to distort, and the nearby Korthok vessels found their own sensors overwhelmed by energy readings that exceeded their measurement capabilities. Several of the warships attempted to retreat, but the gravitational effects of the pending explosion held them in place like insects trapped in amber. Commander Thane's image appeared one final time on the communication screen, his reptilian features showing something that might have been fear. What are you doing, humans? Stand down immediately. Marcus looked directly into the alien commander's eyes. We're doing what humans do best. We're making sure that when we fall, we take our enemies with us. The cascade reaction reached critical mass with a sound like the universe itself screaming. Light brighter than a star's core erupted from Meridian Depot, and space-time twisted into configurations that would have given theoretical physicists nightmares. The energy beam that emerged from the explosion was focused and directed, lancing outward to encompass the entire Korthok fleet in the space of 3 heartbeats. 20 warships that had terrorized worlds across the galaxy were reduced to their component atoms. The explosion was visible from neighboring star systems, a brief new star that announced to anyone watching that something significant had happened in the empty reaches of the Kepler void. But the story didn't end with the destruction of Meridian Depot. The Valerian evacuation ships had reached minimum safe distance when the explosion occurred, and their sensors recorded everything. More importantly, Elena's final transmission had been picked up by monitoring stations across human space and beyond within hours. The recording was being broadcast on communication networks throughout the galaxy. The message was simple but powerful. A small refueling station run by 2 humans had stood against impossible odds to protect alien refugees. They had asked for nothing in return except the knowledge that innocent people would live to see another day. And when faced with certain death, they had chosen to take their enemies with them rather than surrender. The galactic response was unprecedented. Species that had never before interacted with humans suddenly found themselves intensely curious about these newcomers who would sacrifice everything to protect strangers. The Valerian refugees became ambassadors for humanity, carrying the story of Marcus and Elena Chen to every world they visited. More importantly, the destruction of the Korthok fleet had eliminated one of the galaxy's most aggressive military forces. Other species that had been living under the threat of Korthok expansion found themselves free for the first time in generations. The power vacuum left by the fleet's destruction led to a realignment of galactic politics that would last for centuries. Within a year, Meridian Station was rebuilt, not as a simple refueling depot, but as a memorial and diplomatic station where species from across the galaxy could meet and trade in safety. The new station was jointly operated by humans and Valerians, with representatives from dozens of other species serving as observers and mediators. The Chen Memorial Garden, located in the station's central hub, contained plants and minerals from worlds throughout known space. Each contribution came with a small plaque explaining how the sacrifice at the original Meridian Depot had affected that world's history. But perhaps the most important legacy was less tangible. The galaxy had learned something about humanity that would change everything. Humans, it turned out, had a peculiar talent for doing the impossible when motivated by protecting others. They could take the most desperate situations and find ways to turn them into victories, even if those victories came at the ultimate cost. Military academies across the galaxy began studying the Battle of Meridian Depot as an example of how creativity and determination could overcome superior firepower. The concept of human tactics became synonymous with unpredictable, innovative solutions to impossible problems. And in the deepest reaches of space, where other species might face their own desperate moments, they remembered the story of 2 humans who had refused to abandon strangers in need. The legend of Marcus and Elena Chen became a rallying cry for anyone facing overwhelming odds. The galaxy had learned its first lesson about humanity. It would not be the last.